So today's topic in our series on traits is regret, guilt, and shame. The favorite three of all people. Now, I want to talk today about, are these good things or bad things? Are they good traits or are they bad traits? Okay? It's a very important question. I know as I said it, I looked at the guys in the class, and their faces went very long, and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to talk about these things. They're depressing." No, they're not. Let's talk about it. Let's understand. Okay? And we're going to define today really what it means. And it's a very, very important topic because you are correct. There are places where it is completely and utterly misused. And it can be very, very bad. And there are places where it should be used and it's positive. That's what we have to understand today. Okay? Let's begin. So first of all, I claim, and nobody agrees with me here, but I claim in a Jewish context there's no such thing as guilt. Go tell your mother that, there's no guilt, whatever that. I claim that, right? Because the text, the way the term is used is not guilt. It's a different concept. The term that we would say is charata. Charata is regret. Okay? And I want to differentiate that between regret and guilt and then what the concept of shame is, or being embarrassed. And we'll see. So simply put, when I talk about guilt, there's a sense that there's something intrinsically wrong with you that you can never get out of. Okay? And someone was telling me this week, I don't know if it was Chris you were telling me, I don't know who was telling me this, but somebody told me that no, it wasn't, someone else told me, that in Christian theology, apparently if a child dies before they're baptized, they go to hell. Did you hear that, William? That's what I was told. Because the concept of original sin would mean the child is no good. Well, in Jewish concept, it's the opposite. Any child, God forbid, who dies is a ben olam haba, has eternity because they've never done anything wrong. But they've done something right? Well, yeah. In their essence, they are good. So when I talk about guilt, I believe guilt is predicated on the idea that there is something wrong with you and you really can't get out of it. And when we feel that way, when that becomes our modus operandi, that I'm guilty, and I'm not good, then that becomes a very, very painful way to live. And it's not true. And we're going to see tonight that's not the way we're supposed to take it. So I don't think guilt is the right term. The term that we talk about when a person wants to do tshuva, wants to return, the first thing is called charata. Charata is regret. And the difference between regret and guilt is that regret would go and say, I did something wrong, and that propels me to do something right. See, when you feel guilty, it actually doesn't work. You don't go and then do something right afterwards. You sort of wallow in it. And that's really the opposite. I've said to you many times, Rabbi Nachman Breslov talks about the idea of yiush, of a person feeling they want to give up. And he says that's the lowest thing, because what happens is when you feel you want to give up and you're not good, you do worse things. Think about it. If you think of yourself as, I am a great holy person, then when it comes to doing something that's low, you say, I can't do that. That doesn't fit with me. It's below me. But if you think you are bad, no good, you're low, then you're going to do low things because that's who you are. And if you'll notice in your life, it's a fascinating thing. That's what happens. Literally, when you start feeling down about yourself, you're actually more inclined to do worse things. So it doesn't get the expected response. Regret, as opposed to guilt, is a feeling that I say, oh, what I did here was not what I want to be doing. I regret doing it. That propels me to do the next stages of change. Okay? So we're going to see the major difference between the idea of what we talk about in our world, that people feeling guilty, I'm not good, as opposed to the idea of I regret my actions, I'm essentially good, and therefore I need to change my actions. That is the first thing I want to differentiate. But what I want to talk about tonight is on a deeper level, is the idea of embarrassment. Okay, because if you look at the traits, look at the book called The Gates of Repentance, Shari Tshuva, it's a higher level than just I regret when I feel embarrassed about something I did. And that is a very deep topic we need to understand, because today you can spend thousands of dollars going to your psychologist or psychiatrist to try to get rid of any sense of embarrassment. Well, should you? Is having a sense of embarrassment a good thing or a bad thing? What do you think?
This is not something that happens, depending on the situation, something that happens, automatically, something that happens. Somebody can embarrass you or you yourself.
Okay. So very good. There's two different kinds of embarrassments. One is I'm embarrassed about what I've done, and one is other people embarrass me. Now, let's understand a second. William's saying a very important point. And this is really where it gets to what the root of embarrassment is, as you said. The Talmud says, based on, we had something in last week's parsha, that it is better to jump into a fiery furnace than embarrass your friend. Okay? Embarrassing someone is tantamount to murder. And the Talmud says that what happens is when you embarrass someone, their face turns white first, all the blood leaves, and then they turn red. And that blood moving is called shvichus domim. You're spilling the blood. You're actually removing the blood. It's so powerful that the Talmud actually comes out in the story of last week about with Tamar and Yehuda. She didn't want to embarrass him, even though she was right, but she didn't want to embarrass him. And she was willing to actually be killed herself than embarrass someone publicly. There's probably nothing that you could do to a person that is more painful than embarrassing someone publicly, to the point where it's considered to be paramount to killing them. Wow. Why is that? Why is that? And when we think about it today, as I said before, people are like, hey, don't be embarrassed. Let it all hang out, Don't be what you're embarrassed about. But yet the Talmud says not like that. The Talmud says if you embarrass someone, we consider it so serious like you killed them. I'll tell you something else about embarrassment. The Talmud also says the story of Shaul, King Shaul, he had a time where he killed the Kohanim, the priests in the city of Nov. And he thought that there was a rebellion against him, and he killed the Kohanim in the city of Nov, and he did a sin. He did a very terrible mistake, and he did that. And the end of his life, when he was trying to find out what was going to be the future, and he wanted to consult with Samuel, with Shmuel, and he says, I have no way. I don't know where to ask anymore. I tried to ask. I tried to find what my future is, if I should go to battle or not, from everything. But he never mentioned asking the Kohanim, asking the Kohanic breastplate, the Urim Tumim. Why didn't he mention that? And Talmud says because he was embarrassed. He couldn't go and try to consult with the Kohanim to get the answer of what, if he should go to battle or not, what he should do, because he knew that he had killed the Kohanim. He was embarrassed by his actions, and he couldn't even mention it. And the Talmud says, you learn from there. Shmuel answers him, says, tomorrow you're going to die, you'll be with me. The Talmud says, you'll be with him, means that all the sins will be forgiven. And they say that a person who does something wrong and is embarrassed about it, they forgive him for what he did wrong. So don't throw out embarrassment yet, because embarrassment is such a powerful trait that if you embarrass someone else, it's like you killed them, and if you're embarrassed something wrong that you did, it's undone. Wow. So let's understand, before we go to too many counselors to get rid of our quality of embarrassment, let's try to understand it. Okay? It's so much so that the Talmud says it's one of the positive traits of the Jewish people, that they have three traits that are considered to be their unique traits. That they are Rahmanim, they are compassionate, Gomel Chasadim, they do kindness. And the third trait that's considered to be a special, unique quality of the Jewish people is they're Baishanim, they're embarrassed. So don't go running away from embarrassment yet. Hang in, let's try to understand. Okay? So let's go back to the beginning. Okay, let's go back to the very beginning to Adam and Chava. Now, Adam and Eve, were they embarrassed? Well, in the beginning, it says they were in the Garden of Eden, and they were not embarrassed. That's what the text says. They were not embarrassed. Talmud says they weren't wearing clothes, they had relations, they weren't embarrassed. There was no sense of embarrassment. Now, what happened? They ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and all of a sudden they got embarrassed. All of a sudden they're like, oh, we're not wearing any clothes. I don't know about you, but if I'm not wearing clothes, I know before I eat a fruit. Right? You don't think so?
Generally.
So you know you're not eating if you're not wearing clothes. You know. Now that's not what happened here. It says that they ate the fruit and they said, "Oh, I'm not wearing any clothes." They got embarrassed and they took the leaf of the fig tree and they covered themselves because they were embarrassed. Now, how come they were not embarrassed before and suddenly they were embarrassed? Let's try to understand. So, when you take out Shabbat, what happens is there's a ceremony called Havdalah. They hold up the candle and you look at your nails. One of the things you look at your nails is you remember Adam and Chava. When you look at the fire, you remember Adam and Eve. And you remember the nails. Why? Because it says that their skin was translucent like nails. And what does that mean? It means if you banged into them, you'd crack them? What do it mean? They were translucent like nails. What does that mean? So here's what it means. When I have a combination of body and soul, so I right now, whatever you want to say, feel my body more. If I don't eat for 3 hours, you know you didn't eat. If you didn't do a spiritual thing for 3 hours, some people don't do spiritual things for many years. It bothers them, but not as acutely as not eating. So right now, although I am body and soul, the soul is called the stranger in the body. That's what Moshe Chaim explains. When the soul is united with the body, at this stage of reality, it does not transform the body. The power of the soul is diminished when it comes into the body. Because if the power of the soul was in its full brilliance, it would transform your body. Think about it, it makes no sense. If the soul is a spiritual entity, how could it possibly be that you're not keenly aware of your soul? There are people that claim people don't have souls, they say. No one says they don't have a body. Everyone who doesn't feed their body feels it. If they don't feed their soul, they don't always feel it. And when you look at yourself, what do you experience? Experience your body first. And that's the way this world is. But that's not the way it was originally. Originally, the relationship of body and soul with Adam and Chava was the soul was within all of its brilliance in the body. And the soul, therefore, exuded the light from and through the body like translucent fingernails. And that's the way it should be. Because if the soul is in all of its brilliance, the body is just a casing for the soul. Right? And that's what it says. The text says, the Medrash says that in the beginning, God gave them kosnos or, skin of light. Okay, skin of light, which then was changed when they sinned to skin of flesh. Let me see if this board, you can see the board from here. This will be an experiment. Hold on. It's a little bit too far. So I'm going to do like this. Yeah, I think it's too far. Let's try. Tell me, guys, if you can see what I'm saying here. It was kosnos or, can you see that? Or, no way. Can't see it. Sorry. Okay. We can't see it, so we're going to leave that board for now. And Mark, we're going to have to figure out the solution to that. So it's called kosnos, or. The word or that you could see. Oh, it's spelled backwards, sorry. Okay. Or means light. Okay? Or means light. But there's two ways to spell or. One is with the letter aleph, and one's letter ayin. Okay? Aleph and ayin. Two different ways. When God first gave humanity their clothing, it was clothing of or light. Okay? Meaning the body was just a casing for the soul. And therefore, the light of the soul exuded from the body. Once they did the chet, they ate the tree of knowledge of good and evil, means they entered a world of no longer of clarity, a world where good and evil were mixed up. God gave them ksonos, clothing of or, of light with an ayin, which means flesh. I'm not going to get into it now, but the aleph represents the internal spiritual, and the ayin, which means the eye, it looks out. It's the external. So originally what happened was that humanity had this clothing of light. The body was just a casing for the soul. And then what happened was, once they had eaten this tree of good and evil, where it's mixed up, the body became more coarse, more corporal. And the soul was not as apparent in the body. Okay? So now, let's understand. What does it mean that the tree of knowledge of good and evil? So it doesn't mean the tree of evil. It means good and evil are mixed up. Now, how does that work? When you don't know the priorities of things, they start to get confused. Let's give an example. Let's say I take a painting, a beautiful Rembrandt, and I put on it a casing. I put on a frame. You come and you say, that frame is beautiful. The picture I don't care about. But the frame is great. I say, wait a minute. You now have your priorities mixed up. You're seeing the external and not the internal. Let's understand. When Adam and Eve were in the garden not wearing clothes, there was no embarrassment about the body because the body was the extension of the soul. It was the casing, it was the frame of the beautiful picture. But you now understood that the picture was more important than the casing, than the frame. You know, we have a Sefer Torah, we get a Torah. And the Torah, we would put a beautiful covering on top of it. It's only a fool who thinks that the casing, the covering of the Torah is more important than the Torah. But if you appreciate the Torah, you want to have a beautiful covering for it. So to have a beautiful body covering over the beautiful soul, that makes sense. But what's the primary thing is the soul. Once Adam and Eve ate into a world of where good and evil were mixed up, they no longer prioritized right. And they started seeing the external as if it was the main thing. So now they looked at the body and they realized they didn't see their souls anymore. The body, the external, became the more obvious. And therefore there was a sense of embarrassment. Why? Because if you look at me and you see me only as a physical body and not what I am as an incredible soul with an encasing of a body, you are embarrassing me because you're not seeing what I really am. You're not being true to who I am. That's a sense of I'm embarrassed now. I'm embarrassed because I'm this greater thing, but I'm only seen as something less. Does that make sense? That's why, what do? They put on clothing. And I can't show you because we haven't figured out how to do the writing backwards. But there are 3 different terminologies for clothing. Okay? The first one is called a beged. A beged. The word beged, which means clothing, is also from the Hebrew word boged. What is boged? Boged means to betray. So why is clothing called betrayal? So, according to what we said, it makes perfect sense. Because if you see me as only a body and not as a soul, I am betraying what I really am. The clothes, the begadim, remove the betrayal. Because by covering up the external, you're not looking at me as only a body. Who am I? You gotta hear me talk. We have to communicate. Right? People who walk around in nudist colonies, they don't say, oh, you have a beautiful soul. They don't say that. They're not looking at the soul. They look at the externals of the person. So the clothing that Adam and Eve put on was that their body should not betray who they really are. Let me give you another term. Another term for clothes, of a coat in Hebrew is called a me'il. The word me'il is an amazing word. It's the word me'ilah. Me'ilah means the following. If you take a consecrated, a holy object, and you use it for a mundane, that's called me'ilah. That's called a profaning of what it's for. So my body, which is beautiful as a covering for my soul, if that's all I am, then I have profaned what the body is. The body is beautiful as a covering for something much deeper, the soul. Right? So, me'ilah is the profaning, meaning that now if you only use the body as the thing in itself, you have taken something that was meant to be used for something purposeful, something holy, and you've misused it. And now the last term I want you to understand, which really is how I got to this idea. The last term for clothing is called levush. Levush. And the Talmud says levush stands for lo bosh, not to have embarrassment. So what happened was Adam and Eve, before the sin of mixing up good and evil, there was no embarrassment because they knew what they were. They were true to what they were. They were connected to God, and they had no other yearnings that were outside of that. Once they mixed up good and evil, there is now the embarrassment which the clothes remove, because now all you see in me is something that I'm not. You think I'm just a body. And that's the problem, by the way, in the modern world with the whole commercialization and advertisements. What happens is that people become objects. Okay, you put a woman on a billboard. They're not saying, "Wow, what an amazing soul." They're going to buy that car. That's how they're saying. The person becomes an object because all you're seeing now is what the externals of the person. That is embarrassment. The original sense of embarrassment of Adam and Chava and Adam and Eve was when you saw in me something that I'm not. I'm not being true to what I am. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Now let's understand. We have a very famous discussion, and this comes up today in the modern world a lot. A lot of times people want to say, well, how can we hold somebody responsible for something if they didn't know? They weren't taught. And it's a fair question. It's a fair question. Certainly someone who is educated in ways that are righteous will have an easier time of being a good person than someone who is educated in ways that are bad. But how do we hold someone responsible? The deeper way we do that is because a person has a neshama, has a soul. And what happens is that is the barometer for their actions. And we deaden that barometer. And the education you get, if it's bad, it deadens it also. But that barometer is what goes and naturally gives you a sense when you do something wrong. In the beginning, you feel it. You feel when you do something wrong. Now, when you keep doing it, you don't feel it anymore. The sense that you have when you did something that some part of you in the beginning felt not okay about, that is the quality of busha, of embarrassment, that you have built in with you a barometer that says, this is who I'm supposed to be, I'm not being true to what I am. And that is a crucial gauge that everyone needs. And what happens is now in society, we're trying to get people to be desensitized to that gauge. Hey, get rid of your inhibitions. You understand something? You may be throwing out not just your problems of patterns in your life, you may be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You may be throwing out the essential part in a person that has a sense of, this is who I am, and this is not appropriate for me. That's the power of busha, of embarrassment. It's knowing who you are. It's knowing your place. And therefore, when you're not being true to yourself, you feel it. And similarly, as William said before, with other people also. You know, there's an amazing thing. It says that, you know, we talk about gematrias, numerical values. And the numerical value of the word for heart, lave, the heart of a person, is the same numeric as 32. It's the same as the numerical value of the word kavod. Okay? Kavod is your honor. I know, Michael, you spend a lot of time in Asia. In Asia, the idea of honor is a very, very significant concept. And it really is. In America, we become a little desensitized to it. But the idea of your heart, your kavod, is what you are, who you represent. What is your unique quality in the world? When someone embarrasses you in public, they take that quality of who you are, your important higher self, and they drag it through the streets. And that's why it's so significant to be embarrassed that it says if you embarrass someone, it's like killing them. Because there are people, you have this, today maybe things are different because people have lost their sense of embarrassment, but even to the point where somebody would be in a burning building, and he wasn't wearing clothes, maybe he's in his underwear, not wearing clothes, you would see people would actually put on clothes before running out. Well, you're risking your life. Yeah, but the sense of embarrassment is so profound because it's not being true to my inner essence of who I am. That busha, that type of sense of knowing a person and knowing who we are is crucial. You do not want to deaden that sense. And you can't deaden it in how you relate to other people. Because you have to honor your friend. It says you should honor your friend like your rabbi. You should honor him more. Honor your students like your friends. You have to raise up people's honor. When you have to look at someone who's your equal, treat them even higher. And people make a tremendous mistake. It says in Pirkei Avos, as our Father says, whoever honors others is honored. In America, they think the opposite. We think that I'm going to get a step up on someone else by putting them down. You make a great mistake. Because that's not how it works. When you raise someone else up, and you see people who do this, who honor other people, raise them up, everyone loves the person. Everyone sees how great they are. So you're not even gaining anything. The honor of the person, meaning seeing who they are in their essence, is so primary that when that is denigrated to others, it's like killing them. And when we denigrate it in ourselves, then we could be forgiven for what we did wrong because we realize that's not who I am. Like the story of Shaul, of Saul. Once he had the gap between who he really was and he realized, oh my gosh, what did I do? I wasn't true to myself. That is a higher form of returning to who you are. That's why it's a higher level already of tshuva, returning. Because now you're tuning into what I really am. I'm embarrassed about my action. That's not who I really am. So don't try to get rid of that quality. Try to tune in to the quality. Let me explain a little bit further about this idea of busha, embarrassment. So, there's another idea, because we're in Hanukkah time right now. The Greeks were the opposite of embarrassment. If you look in the story of Daniel, when Daniel sees the vision of the four kingships that are going to be, the dynasties, the Babylonian, the Persian, the Greek, and the Roman, before the Mashiach comes, before the truth is revealed into the world. So the Greeks are compared to a leopard, a namir. And Thomas says the namir is brazen. He's brazen. Now, why were the Greeks brazen? The Greeks were brazen because they, as opposed to the other powers, they used the power of the mind. They created this philosophies. They created ideas that they felt now that raised them to be a higher level. And therefore, they felt brazen. They wanted to take on anyone else and show that they were right. That's why they wanted to fight the Jews. The battle with the Jews was not on they didn't care if the Jews would live. They didn't like the Jews had their philosophy, their great connection to God of the Torah. They wanted to fight against that, how the mind should be used. So a brazen person is the opposite of a person who has embarrassment. The person who is brazen, by definition, no matter who they come up against, they have to take them down. Okay? So the Greeks see the Jews, and they see the Jews learning Torah, and they're learning the wisdom that's godly wisdom. They have to make them Hellenists. They have to break them from that, because that's a threat to the leopard. That's what it is. A person who is brazen will not know his place in front of other people. A person who has a sense of knowing who they are, when they come up to someone who's greater than they will have a sense of, oh, I might not know everything. And they could have that proper humility then, because they have the proper busha. And that's what we need in terms of relating to God. It says when we got the Torah on Mount Sinai, it said that God put it in us now that we would have the awe of Him forever, because we understood the relationship. A human being is not God. And therefore, when you come to something that's infinitely greater than you, you know your place, and you're able to receive it. But a haughty person, a brazen person says, I'm going to take everybody on. So there's two dynamics to this quality of busha, of sense of embarrassment. And I don't mean it in the crazy ways that our society has taken, but I mean in the positive sense. One sense is to know your place and to never go below what your level is, because then you're dragging your greatness through the mud. And if you do to somebody else, you've killed them, because you've taken who they are, their divine aspect, and you dragged it through the mud. So one thing is to know your own place. Second thing is to know who you're dealing with. If I'm dealing with a person who is beyond me, then I have the proper approach. I could accept from them because they know more. And certainly, if I'm receiving from God, I have the proper position. I say, who am I? But the Greeks in the story of Hanukkah want to take the Jews down and their godly Torah, because they are the opposite of the quality of busha, of knowing their place, knowing they're having that type of humility that comes through the sense ability to know. That's the other idea, and that's why, for example, it's fascinating. It says if you take the words boshet, embarrassment, it's the same letters as the word Shabbat. Okay? Shabbat, the Sabbath. What's the connection between the Sabbath and Shabbos and the sense of embarrassment? And again, I know the word embarrassment is a dirty word in this world, so we have to understand the positive we're talking about. Because when Shabbos is so elevated, you feel you're on a spiritual level, then a person goes and doesn't feel himself, I can do whatever I want to do. I got to be careful here. I got to honor something. You walk into a place or a time that's at a higher level than you're at, you have to know your position. Those are the two aspects of the quality of busha, of embarrassment. It's essentially to know your place and thereby your place in relationship to others. This quality the world has tried to throw out. And it's a mistake. It's a mistake. Guilt that tells you you're no good, tells you you're down, tells you whatever you do is damned, that is a very wrong concept. Throw that away. But to know that you have an important divine spark, and to thereby know that when you are not being true to yourself, you should feel a sense of something wrong. I'm not living up to who I am. That is healthy. That's a sign of health. And so the first step, when you aren't living up to what you do, don't get stuck in I'm bad. Regret what you do, and that propels you to change, and then allow yourself to see, this is who I am, and how did I allow myself to act this way? And that feeling of the disparity between the two, actually, as the Talmud says in the story of Shaul, will be the thing that propels you to really fix up your ways and be accepted again as the higher level human being that you really are. Okay, everyone, have a great night.